Hi there. I know it's after I said I would start. We said we would start at 11 and we did, but we posted it to our private YouTube channel instead of our public YouTube channel. So I am sorry. If you are here 10 minutes late, welcome to very first live YouTube video on boundaries. I had noticed that we've gotten a little bit more interaction on our YouTube channel, and so I thought I would start doing some lives. I do a lot of live Facebook videos, and so I thought I would start doing some live YouTube videos so that those who may be more familiar with YouTube or like YouTube better, that you could join me and I could start to answer some of your relationship questions. Now, in case you have no idea who I am, let me introduce myself. I am Leslie Vernick. I'm a relationship counselor and coach. I'm the author of 7 books, The Emotionally Destructive Relationship, The Emotionally Destructive Marriage, and How to Act Right When Your Spouse Acts Wrong are probably my 3 most popular books. But you can check them out on Amazon. But I have had a career over 40 years of working with individuals in difficult and destructive relationships. And so I just want to help you understand the concept today of boundaries. Are they biblical? Because so often when you're in a relationship with a destructive or toxic person, when you try to establish a boundary with them about something, if they're a Christian, they may say something to you like, well, you're just being unkind. That's not biblical. It's not biblical to have boundaries. Where do you see in the Bible to have a boundary with me? And they start making you feel guilty or shaming you for wanting to stand up for yourself. Like somehow that's not allowed if you're a Christian, that you're just supposed to be passive and always turn the other cheek and allow someone to continue to use or abuse you. And that's a whole other subject, which we can talk about if this becomes an interesting channel to hang out with together. But today, I just want to talk to you about boundaries. Are they biblical? What are they? And how do you state a boundary? So first of all, yes, they are biblical. They were right in the beginning in the garden. God set a boundary with Adam and Eve. He said, Adam and Eve, here's a boundary. You can eat everything in the garden except for one thing. This thing is not okay with me. This is all okay. This is not okay. Now, he didn't force them to follow his boundaries, but he was very clear with them. This is okay with me. This is not okay with me. All right, so one of the functions of a boundary, there's 2 main functions of a boundary. Why do we have to have a boundary? Why is it important? The first function is for establishing identity. When we have a boundary about something, we are clearer about what it is or what it's about or who's responsible for it. So boundaries establish identity, which helps us understand this is what this is what it's not. So for example, when God gave the Israelites the promised land, he said, from here to here to here to here to here, this is your land. Don't go here. Don't go here. This is not yours. This is yours. So that boundary line of all the places God said were the promised land is the promised land. And this part is the heathen land. This is where the other people live, the Hittites and the Canaanites and all of those people. Don't go there. That's not yours. This is yours. In the United States, we have boundaries around our states. Now, we don't have big fences, but when you drive out of Arizona into Colorado, for example, it says, welcome to Colorado. So we understand that Arizona is not Colorado. I am not you. When a child is a little baby, they're not distinguishing themselves from their mother. They just sort of see we're one thing. That's why they don't really care about your feelings. They don't care about if they keep you up all night because you're there to serve them as a baby. If they're hungry, you better be there. But later on, as a child starts to mature, they start to see themselves as a little different. Like, oh, I'm not you, Mom. I can run away from you. I can say, no, I'm not going to eat my vegetables. And I can even close my mouth, my boundary, not getting into my mouth. And so children begin to establish a sense of identity. I'm different than you. I don't have to do what you want me to do. And it starts with that word, no. You see, God created human beings with the freedom to say no in order to establish, no, that's not okay with me. No, that's not what I want to do. No, I'm different than you are. I don't have those values. I don't have those desires. I don't want to do those things. And so boundaries are important to establish identity. They're also important to establish responsibility. Like who's responsible for what? And if we go back to our illustration of states, we see that people who are living in Arizona are responsible to Arizona to pay their taxes. I don't pay taxes to Colorado. And Arizona is responsible to give me certain services like fire departments and garbage collection and all the things that I pay my taxes for. Colorado doesn't provide those services for Arizona. They're not responsible to. Now, if Arizona had a big natural disaster, Colorado and New Mexico and neighboring states may help Arizona, but they're not responsible for Arizona. Now, we see this illustrated where we don't want to take responsibility for ourselves in the book of Genesis. When Adam and Eve sinned, who did they blame? Eve blamed the serpent. Adam blamed Eve. God said, nope, each of you are responsible for your own choices. He didn't blame Adam for Eve's choice. He didn't blame Eve for Adam's choice. Each of you are responsible for your own choices. So we have two different kind of boundaries. We have internal boundaries. In other words, when we're taking responsibility for ourselves and we have an identity in ourselves. This is what I stand for. This is what I don't stand for. This is what's good for me. This isn't what's good for me. And we establish that as we mature, then we make some boundaries about that, right? So for example, Arizona makes a boundary that marijuana isn't good for Arizona right now. They're making that boundary. Other states have said, hey, marijuana is great for our, state. It helps bring revenue or whatever it does. So we'll let everybody buy marijuana. All right. Or guns aren't good in our state. New York says we're not allowing anybody to have guns unless you go through stringent, security clearances. Arizona says, hey, Second Amendment gives you the right to carry guns. So each state establishes their own internal boundaries of what's okay with them and what's not okay with them. As a human being, you're going to have to establish some internal boundaries about what you will do, what you won't do, what's okay with you, what's not okay with you. You may need to communicate that with others, but if you don't set that for yourself, for example, I have some boundaries, like I don't eat sweets. They're not good for me. I gain a lot of weight. I don't eat bread. That's a boundary. I don't curse. That's a boundary. I do certain things. I don't do certain things, not because someone told me I have to do them, but because I've established certain internal boundaries. A really good example of that would be in the Bible when David in Psalm 39, for example, if you read it, he's talking about being in the presence of the wicked. How many of us are struggling when they're in the presence of the wicked? Now, we may have to set some boundaries on the wicked, but David set a boundary on himself. He said, I will put a muzzle on my mouth in the presence of the wicked. In other words, I don't want to be just like them. I don't want to spew out vile words. I don't want to repay evil for evil. So I'm going to have to put a boundary on my mouth so I don't do that, right? So he's taking responsibility for his words because he knows his buttons are going to be pushed. He knows he's going to be provoked, and he's taking ownership or responsibility or stewardship for himself. Examples of the Bible where it says, guard your heart above all else, for it is the wellspring of life. Who's responsible to do that? I'm not responsible to do that for you. I'm responsible to do that for me. Or take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Who's responsible to do that? You are. So having boundaries of what I will do, what I won't do, and establishing those patterns of self-control, where Titus 2:12 says, teaching us to say no to ungodliness and worldly lust so that we might live soberly and righteously in a wicked age. Those are internal boundaries. We may also need to set external boundaries in order to take better care of ourselves or take responsibility for ourselves. So here's a really good example from the Bible itself. In Proverbs 6, God tells someone who's too nice. How many of you would raise your hand and say, I'm too nice. I get taken advantage of all the time. I'm doing things I don't want to do because I feel afraid to say no. Okay, so this is for you. In Proverbs 6, it says, hey, and I'm summarizing here, you can read it for yourself. Hey, if you were too nice of a person, you were very generous, you're too nice, and someone comes up to you and says, hey, can you co-sign on my loan? I can't get a loan for my car, or I can't get a loan for my apartment or my house, and I need a co-signer. Will you co-sign? Now, as a Christian, we think, oh, that's a good thing to do. We need to be generous. We need to be giving. We need to be gracious. The Bible's saying, no, say no. And if you were too nice and you said yes, go back to them and say, I made a mistake. Please take my name off the loan. I shouldn't have done that. That's a boundary. I will not co-sign your loan. All right? You may ask me, and I have to say no to someone else because my boundary is it's not good for me to carry your burden of financial debt when you've not carried your own burden. You see, the Bible says, bear one another's burdens in Galatians, which we should when someone's burden is overwhelming. So again, we go back to the States. If Arizona or when the fires in Australia, right, that burden was overwhelming, then US and other countries flew in other firefighting equipment and people to help them. It was overwhelming. They couldn't bear that load. But it also says each one should carry their own load. So normally, Australia takes care of its own country. We don't go in and rescue them, right? And if a state is being fiscally irresponsible, then another state wouldn't come in and bail them out. That would be foolishness. And so when someone's fiscally irresponsible and we come in and save them with a cosign, the Bible's saying, don't do that. Set a boundary. Another place that you would be surprised is in Matthew 25. There's a story of 10 virgins. You know the story. They all had oil lamps and they were waiting for the groom to come. And they fell asleep. And then in the middle of the night, the groom came, or the return of Christ, and they went out to meet him. But 5 of those little girls or women didn't have enough oil left. They weren't responsible for themselves to fill their lamp up before that time. And so they said to the other 5 girls who were responsible, give us some of your oil because we're going to run out. And those other 5 girls said, no, go get your own oil. You were irresponsible. Go take care of your responsibility. We're not responsible to cover for your irresponsibility. That's called codependence. And so they said no. And when the groom came, he didn't say to the 5 girls who said no, let me tell you something, ladies, you were so selfish and you weren't gracious. You should have given those other girls your oil. He didn't say that. You should have sacrificed. You should have been willing to suffer for their well-being. He didn't say that. They were right. They were right to say no. And so this is an example of boundary setting, that you're not to take responsibility for someone else's irresponsibility. So if your kids don't do their homework for them. If your husband is in debt, don't try to fix it for him. If you have a boundary, let me tell you how to set it. So let's say that you don't like your husband yelling at you. It scares you. It scares the children. You can't set a boundary with someone by saying, you can't treat me that way. Because a rebellious person will say, want to bet? Watch me. Watch me. So what you need to say it is a different way. I won't let myself, you won't say it this way, but in your mind, you have to be okay with this. I won't let myself be treated this way. It's not only not good for me and the children, it's not good for him. If you watch the movie Unbroken, the story of Louis Zampini, the World War II person who was captured by the Japanese and severely tortured and abused by one of his captors. We saw that it was not only harmful for Louis to be tortured and tormented that way. And if you watch Nazi Germany's, any of those kind of, or prison guards who are treating prisoners horribly, anybody who treats somebody else horribly, it's not only bad for the victim, it also is bad for the perpetrator. We see how deformed they become as a human being, where they begin to delight in harming others and finding it fun to watch someone else suffer. That's a degraded human being. That's a deformed human being. We don't do them any gracious favors. It's not loving them well to enable that. And so if you're in a situation where you can help it, if you're in prison and there's a prison guard doing it, you can't help it. If you're a slave and your master's treating you horrible, you might not be able to help it. If you're in a country where you have no legal protection, you might not be able to help it. But in this country, the Bible says, in any situation, but in our country, we have laws about it. If someone's treating you and you're in a relationship with that person, like marriage, in an abusive and harmful way, it is good for you to overcome evil with good. What does that look like? It might look like setting some boundaries. It might look like, hey, if you talk to that mate, or if you punch holes in the walls when you get angry, I'm not going to live with you anymore. This is not good for me. It's not good for you. It's not good for our children. It's not good for our marriage. I won't continue to pretend that this is okay. My boundary is I won't live like this. And you have to be prepared then to do what you need to do, to take responsibility for yourself and your children's safety, both physical safety, financial safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, mental safety. And as women, we've not been really taught how to take ownership of ourselves. We want to be taken care of. We've grown up with, we want Prince Charming, we want a white horse and somebody to come in and rescue us. It's not going to happen. Part of being a fully mature grown-up is taking responsibility for yourself, which is part of what a boundary is. That I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for my safety. And if someone jeopardizes my safety, even if they're reckless driving, what if your husband's a reckless driver and he's a road rager or he drinks and drives? How would you set a boundary on that? Not, you can't drive that way. He's going to say, watch me. And now you're a sitting duck in the car and your kids are terrified in the back seat. But you can say, I won't drive with you anymore. I'll drive myself. Or if I'll drive the car and you sit, because I can't feel safe when you can't control yourself, when you get upset in the car and you start honking your horn and driving after someone who cut you off and scaring all of us to death in the backseat, possibly causing an accident. So when you set a boundary with someone, you set it on what you will do and what you won't do. I will not drive with you. I will not have a conversation with you if you escalate your anger. I will not have a conversation with you at all without the presence of a third person, right? So those would be boundaries. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. This is what I will give. This is what I won't give. This is none of you. Here's a really good example of boundaries, and then I'm going to answer your questions. None of you would pull out your ATM card and say to a stranger or even a good friend, here you go, help yourself. here's my access code. I've got plenty of money, help yourself, whatever you need. You would never do that. You have a boundary around your finances. This is what I can give. This is what I can't give. This is what I'm responsible to pay for my own bills. And this is what I have extra that I can be generous with. You make that decision as a good steward of your finances. You need to make that same decision as a good steward of your emotions, of your body. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. Maybe your husband's asking you to do things sexually that you would find degrading, repulsive. You don't have to say yes. You can say, this is what I will do. This is what I won't do. This is demeaning to me. This makes me feel cheap. This makes me feel degraded, right? You wouldn't give your ATM card to anybody with no boundaries. I can give you $100. I can't give you $1,000. All right. And so those are ways that you can begin to set boundaries. They are biblical. They're for your good. They're for the good of a relationship. So someone understands what are the boundaries of this relationship, just like God set in motion some boundaries with Adam and Eve. They crossed them and there were consequences. And that's what happens when relationship boundaries are crossed. There are consequences. And perhaps in the future, we can do a YouTube live about consequences. But I know we have some people on the line. Thank you for coming back with our first 10-minute fiasco. And I want to answer some questions. So hold on, I got to get my glasses on so I can see the questions because I'm old and I have older eyes. And although I have contacts on, I can't read close still very well without my glasses, readers. All right, so let me just answer some questions for you. And let's go. I love that you're talking about boundaries. I got married really young and really believed that in order to be a godly wife, I had to always follow my husband. Well, 8 years into it, I can see that he is very foolish with many of his decisions. So I'm trying to stand up for what's good for our family, but I'm getting a lot of flack about being ungodly and rebellious. Is this true? So I don't know, because I think that when we're sick of someone's foolishness, we can, just like David, when he said, I'm going to put a muzzle on my mouth, we can be reactive and retaliatory, all right? Because that's our human nature too. Because even when we're a victim in a destructive marriage, doesn't mean we're sinless, all right? We can do some destructive things ourselves in our own hurt or in our own anger. So I think this is where it takes some soul searching and self-reflection. And I talk about core strength. In fact, I'm going to be doing a free webinar on February 4th about this core strength. And I we'll do a Facebook Live, not Facebook Live, but a YouTube Live a little bit on it too. I think I have some YouTube videos on it if you want to search for it. But I'm going to be doing this webinar on February 4th. You can sign up for it. There should be a link here. It's leslievernick.com/join webinar. It's free. It's on the 4 lies that Christian women believe that keep them stuck, afraid, and miserable in their destructive marriage. And so the question is, am I being rebellious to set boundaries? No, but you do need to be prayerful. And so here's the sequence that Jesus tells us. He tells us when someone sins against us to go to them, but he gives us a little bit of a prequel to how to do that in relationship or with people, a little bit in a different passage in Matthew, in I think chapter 6, this go to them is in Matthew 18, but in chapter 6, he says, don't judge people. That's not your place. And so what I mean by judge is don't look at someone with contempt, all right? It doesn't mean that we can't call a spade a spade. So if someone's sinning, saying they're sinning isn't judging, all right? That's not judging. What judging means is, I can't believe you're a sinner. You're disgusting. Like, I'm not a sinner, right? So judging is somehow I'm superior than you. I would never do that. And so Jesus cautions us against that superior, judgmental, condemnation attitude. We can call a spade a spade. This isn't right. God says it's not right. This isn't good. I'm not going to cooperate with this. But to do it in a spirit of condemnation and critical spirit and judgment is not of him. So he says, don't judge. And then right after that, he says, hey, before you start taking the log out of someone or the speck out of someone else's eye, kind of look inside, because you might have that judgmental spirit, or maybe you have the same problem. And this is why you're so able to clearly see the speck in their eye, because you got a log in your own eye. Okay. So he's telling us a sequence of self-reflection and self-examination as we have interaction with people that are harsh or destructive or foolish. And then he goes on to say, and this is real interesting, you have to speak up to someone in Matthew 18. And if they hear you, you've reconciled the relationship. If they don't hear you, the relationship continues to deteriorate. And then he says in this Matthew 6 passage, don't cast your pearls before swine. Isn't that interesting? Here's a boundary. I'm not going to keep talking to you over and over and over again. When you just trample what I say underfoot, you totally disregard what I say. It's like speaking to the wind. I'm not going to keep doing it. Jesus tells you not to, right? That the relationship isn't the relationship you thought. Because when you're in a healthy relationship with someone, you have a conversation where what you say matters to them. So if my husband says something to me like, hey, that really hurt my feelings, I felt you were disrespectful, I'm not going to just say, you're being ridiculous. I'm going to listen and consider it. And if it's true, I'm going to repent and think about it and change. That's what healthy people do. In a relationship, it doesn't mean that everything goes well and there's no sin. It means that when you mess up, you fess up, confess it. So the very definition of foolishness is that you don't learn from your mistakes. You don't listen to anybody. Proverbs is full of those descriptors of a foolish person. Again, just defining someone as foolish is a definition. Make sure you don't do it with contempt and condemnation, which is with judging them like, I've never been foolish, right? So here's what an example would be. In the book of 1 Samuel, I believe around 25, there's a story that gives us a little bit of an idea of God's heart on this. So there was a couple named Abigail and Nabal, and it says she was a beautiful and intelligent woman married to a foolish and surly man. And I'm not going to go through the whole story, but you can read it for yourself. But Nabal made a decision to not feed David's men when he should have. The Jewish hospitality was you always feed people who come to your house. And David didn't come to his house, but he was in his territory, in Nabal's territory. And he protected Nabal's shepherds from marauding thieves that would steal the sheep. And in return, David asked for food for his men. And Nabal said, I didn't ask you to protect my men. No, I'm not going to feed you. And David was so triggered by that injustice that he made a stupid statement himself. And he said, I'm going to kill everybody in your house. So David's his horse and his men are riding to Nabal's house to kill everybody, including Nabal. And the servants hear about this and they go to Abigail. They say, oh my gosh, your husband's at it again. He made a stupid decision. David's coming to kill everybody. And if we listen to typical biblical counsel, Abigail should have just submitted to Nabal's foolishness and trusted God to save her. But that's not what she did. She said to her servants, go prepare a meal for David's men. She totally contradicted her husband's foolishness. The servants went to her because they knew she was an intelligent woman. She acted wisely. She didn't act contemptuously or judgmentally toward her husband. But read the story. She goes to David humbly. She says truthfully, my husband's a fool. I'm so sorry he offended you. Please take this meal. And then she says something very powerful. And this is a little clue of how to speak to your husbands. She couldn't speak to her husband who was the fool, but she spoke to another man who was enraged and he was about to do something that would have harmed his own ministry and his own future as the king of Israel. She spoke not to his anger. She spoke to his identity. David, man of God, is this something you really want on your legacy as the future king of Israel? And it woke him up. No, that's not what I want to do. So sometimes I speak to women. I say, hey, woman of God, yeah, you're angry at your husband. Yeah, you're frustrated. Yeah, you're depressed. But how you're behaving right now, going to sleep with your neighbor or throwing a fit and getting depressed, wanting to kill yourself, is this what you want to do about what's happening to you? Or do you want to grow through this and handle this in a different way? Woman of God, don't let the circumstances of life deform you. God calls you to rise up and be a warrior woman. And I love to teach women how to do that. But for you, I wouldn't say you're being rebellious or ungodly just by doing something different than your husband. You might be saving your entire household from his foolish decisions. But I don't know what your attitude is inside. So those are the things that you have to do some business with God. Okay? We live really close to our families, but this also means that whenever we try to create our own family traditions or activities, our families always show up. I love my family, but I also want to establish my family. How can I do this tactfully? This is a great question and a real common question. So here's where you establish these boundaries. And this is where this is our family, this is our family, this is our family. So you've got your nuclear family, you and your husband. Then, so you do this even with your children. You have your nuclear family of you and your husband. So I'm going to draw a little diagram here. So this is the marriage, and ideally, okay, this is the marriage. This is the marriage, and then you have a good marriage if you do, and this is children. Okay, children, and then your children get married, and they form their marriage and their children. Okay, so this isn't the same anymore. And as you have formed your marriage and your children, and you've got other family members around that circle, I think it's really important, just like you have your house and they have their house. And I would imagine that you have locks on your doors, or they just can't come to your house whenever they want, or every time, they feel like stopping over, they would stop over and you have to let them in, right? So there's some boundaries there, even if they're unspoken boundaries, just rules of politeness that your family has grown up with. So I think it's okay to say, hey, family, I want to change how we do things a little bit. So I did this with my family. So I'll just give you an example. So my family, I lived in Pennsylvania and my family lived in Chicago, and everybody always went home for Christmas for Chicago. Well, we did that twice, and we got caught in snowstorms on the way home because we couldn't afford to fly, and we would be driving, and then we'd spend like 12 hours on the road in a snowstorm, and it was just exhausting and it was stressful. And so I said to my mom, my stepmom and my dad, I don't think we're going to be coming home for Christmas anymore. For one reason, it's just too hard. The weather is too iffy. And second of all, I want to establish some memories of Christmas morning with my house. I want my kids to open up their presents at my house so that when they get older, they want to come back, not to your house, but to my house, that they would, have those memories of our family Christmas, not always going to grandma's house for Christmas. And although my parents were a little disappointed, they totally understood. And so I think part of it is just being able to say it without anger. So we don't wait until we're so upset that we say it in a harsh way, but that we just say, I'm thinking this is what I'd like to change for this year. Or, this year we're going to spend Thanksgiving just as our family. Or this year we're going to take our vacation by ourselves. We're not going to go on an extended family vacation. I love that. But I think we just need some family time, our family time, and verbalize that and then stick with it. You might get some kickback. You might get some guilt trips. Oh, you mean you don't care about us? I'm not saying that. I love you. But I just think that we need some time as a family to establish that family unit a little bit better, right? Oh, well, you're never going to take a vacation. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this year we're going to take a vacation by ourselves. So start establishing some independent things and see how it goes. And as you do that, they'll get more and more used to it. My parents have always relied on me to organize things. Now they are aging, but it feels like all the responsibility is falling on me. I want to help, but it's too much with me having to work and also be there for my 3 teen kids. Can I talk to my parents about their expectations of me? Okay, so this is a really common problem, and this would be true whether it's your adult parents, and some of you, for your adult children, you were an over-functioning mother. You are what I would call a too good mother. And so you've always been there for your kids. You've always done everything for your kids. You've always rescued them from their messes. And as they grow up, they still expect that of you. And now they only expect it of you. They expect you to do it with their children. You give up your life to babysit their kids so they can work, or they can go on vacation, or you give up your weekend so you can babysit and they can go have fun. And you're like, I don't want to do this. How do I speak up? So the first thing is you're going to have to own your problem. So I would go into my parents and say, Mom and Dad, I love you. So I would establish the relationship. If this is true, you wouldn't say it if it's not true. I love you. I love helping you guys all my life. I'm really good at organizing, and I've been here to organize your finances and organize your house and all those kind of things. And I'm finding it that I'm running out of time, that I only have so much time. And I've got now my own family. I've got 3 kids of my own. I've got a full-time job, and I'm running out of time. So I'm not going to be able to do all that I used to do before. What's most important to you? And we may have to hire out some of the other things. Like maybe we can hire a cleaning lady, and maybe we can hire someone to bring in a couple meals or do that food service or Meals on Wheels. Maybe whatever it is that you don't want to do anymore. You can say, maybe we can hire some of that out, or I'm going to have to talk to our siblings and see if other people can chip in. But I just don't have the bandwidth to continue to do all I'm doing anymore. And I know it means a lot to you to have this done. So let's work together toward a solution that's a good fit for everybody. So you're presenting the problem. I can't do this anymore. You're showing a lot of empathy for the shift, because for older people, a shift creates anxiety for them. So you're not abandoning them. You're saying, let's work toward a solution to our problem. I can't do this anymore. You still need help. That's a win-win. And you're going to have to be really firm. I know that you like me coming over 3 times a week to, clean your house and get your meals all established and take you to the doctor and make sure all your bills are paid. I wish I could do that. I can't. I'm just one person. So I don't know what the solution is. And so it might be that you have to have a meeting with your siblings and brainstorm a lot of solutions. So it might be, hey, mom and dad, if mom and dad really want me to do this, maybe I need to quit my full-time job and the family pays me what I'm working my full-time job to do that. Maybe that's a solution. Maybe the solution is we find someone else to do it. Maybe the solution is some of the siblings help to do some of that. Maybe a solution is, your parents can do some of this stuff. I don't know, but you can work toward a solution. But when you rock the status quo. So let's say you've always been a mom who overfunctions for all your kids. You're doing it, and you don't want to do it anymore. You want to go back to college. You want to take a painting class. You want to go on a girls' trip. And yet you can't because you're babysitting your kids all summer. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. All right, well, then you need to speak up. But it's not, hey, you guys are expecting too much of me. You need to say, hey, I think I've been negligent in taking care of me. I've been so anxious about being a good mother and a good grandmother, a good daughter, that I haven't taken really good care of me, and I'm paying the price now. I'm tired, I'm cranky. I need to take some time for me. And there's some things I want to do before I exit this world that I've never gotten a chance to do. I want to take a painting class, or I want to go on a girlfriend trip. And I can't do that if I'm babysitting your kids all the time. And so I can babysit them 1 day a week, but I can't babysit them every week, or whatever your boundaries are. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. This is what I can do. This is what I can't do. So you're beginning to express that in kind ways, but expressing it and holding firm to your boundaries. Oh boy, I'm so glad I found you. I've read your book and have started to make some changes, but I keep questioning myself if I'm being prideful or just selfish by trying to put me first sometimes. This is a new muscle that feels very weak. Can you give me some advice? I've been married 15 years and have 5 kids. Well, you've got plenty to do with 5 kids, so it's important for you to put yourself first. And let me just define something. Self-care is not a pedicure. I'm not against pedicures. I love pedicures. But self-care is putting your own oxygen mask on first. Why? Because you do want to have the ability to give to others. You're a caring person. You have 5 children. You're married. But if you don't take the time to eat, sleep, exercise, refresh your soul, mentally stimulate yourself, do what you need to do to stay on top of your game spiritually, mentally, emotionally, you're just giving everybody access to your ATM card, and you're not putting anything back in the bank. How long is that going to work? All right. So if we think of money as a resource, so if we think of money as a resource, so you only have, sorry, I didn't come prepared to drop pictures, but I tend to drop pictures. Hold on. So if you have 3 resources at your disposal. All right. So let me just go through this a little bit. Time, money, and okay. So we all have these resources at our disposal. You have time, you have money, and you have energy. All right. And these are all limited. We all have 24 hours a day. We have limited amount of money. Most of us are not billionaires and trillionaires where we don't worry about money. We have a limited amount of money, and we have a limited amount of energy. We don't all have the same amounts. So we all have the same amount of time. We all have 24 hours. But some of us have a little bit more money disposable than others, and some don't. And some have a little bit more energy. Some are more sick or whatever. Some are older. You don't have as much energy. All right. So these things, you get a fresh start every day with more time. You get 24 hours every day. But these 2, you have to be intentional about replenishing, right? So these are bank accounts. And if you don't put money into the bank account, it's constantly draining out of the bank account. What's that going to do? If you give someone unlimited access to your ATM card, and you don't have limited money or unlimited money going into that bank account, pretty soon you're going to go overdrawn, right? And you're going to then feel what? Stressed out. If you have limited energy, which we all do, and you're not taking time to replenish that energy, and I'm not just talking about physical energy, I'm talking about mental energy, spiritual energy, emotional energy, right? And if you don't take time to replenish that energy, so for me, for example, if I don't sleep 8 to 9 hours a day, I feel depleted. If I don't exercise a little bit every day, I feel old and cranky. If I don't stimulate my mind with learning something new, painting, a new language, a new idea, watching a YouTube video. If all I'm doing is watching movies and sitting on my couch all day, doing social media, I'm depleting myself, right? So I need to do something to replenish this energy bank so that I can give to you, so I can be on YouTube Live, so I can write a book, so other people. I'm not just doing all this stuff without in the background replenishing my bank, all right? I couldn't. Even all the stuff that I do for free, YouTube, Facebook, I have an income source too by offering paid things that replenishes that so that it pays for all the things I do that are free. We just can't keep giving without putting something back in the pot. But when you put things back in the pot intentionally, when I put things in the money pot, it then frees me to give out more. When you put things back in the energy pot by sleeping well and taking good care of you, it gives you the oomph to give out in good, kind, loving ways. Otherwise, you're giving out resentfully, you're depleted, you feel like skim milk, you're cranky. That's not what God wants you to do. Even Jesus took time. He said, I'm going off to myself. I'm going to a quiet place to pray. He slept. He did what he needed to do to replenish, to recharge. And so please, that's not selfish. It's called stewardship of you. It's taking responsibility of you to guard your heart, to take every thought captive, to grow into the person that God wants you to be. That takes some energy and time to do that for you so that you have something to give as a good wife, as a good mother, as a good person to others. Okay? Let me define selfish. Selfish is not saying no to someone else and saying yes to you. Now, obviously, there are times when you have to say no to you and say yes to someone else. I'll give you an example. So if you have an infant and they're screaming and crying, you may have to say no to your sleep and yes to taking care of your baby, right? But if you have a 10-year-old who's throwing a fit in the middle of the night, you may have to say, you have to figure that out on your own. I'm going to bed, right? Because there's a part of time where someone is manipulating you and depriving you of your energy, or just like a cosigner depriving you of your money resource in order to feed their unhealthiness. You don't do that. That's not healthy for them. It's not healthy for you. And so if my husband's having a heart attack, of course I'm going to stay up all night and take care of him, go to the doctor, whatever. If he just wants to watch a movie together, I'm going to say, I got to go to bed. Right? And so those are the ways that you can discern. Is their need or their want more important? This happens a lot in the sexual realm. You've got 5 kids, you're exhausted, your husband wants sex 3 times a day. It's just not going to happen. Is that selfish or is that stewardship? It's stewardship. It's saying, I need to protect some of my resources because I've got to give out a lot with 5 kids and 1 husband and other things in my life. So I have got to take care of me. That's not selfish. Selfishness is always expecting everyone to do what you want and give you what you want. So if you're married to people like that, or you're raising little people like that, and you're accommodating that, you're actually teaching them to be more selfish by always giving them what they want, because then they're going to grow up with a mindset that's called an entitlement mindset. I'm entitled to get what I want all of the time. Not healthy. All right. I think we're out of questions. I think, Martha, I don't see any more questions. So I am so glad. Let me just look on the feed here. I don't see anything else here. So let me see if there's anything else here. Yeah, Emily's saying, thank you for truth. All that is taught in this in Tennessee is for wives to submit. Yeah. Yeah, and so I do a lot of teaching on this whole topic. I would really encourage you to sign up for my webinar for February 4th. I'm going to do one at noon, same one live, and then I'm going to do one at 7:30. And what's neat about the webinar, you can't come unless you signed up, but it's on a different site. It's not on a Facebook or it's not on YouTube, so nobody can read your comments on the webinar other than people who attend the webinar. So you can be a little bit more vulnerable or a little bit more honest with your questions because you're just there and you're there with other people who are sort of in the same boat. So I would just encourage you, that will really help you to get a sense of the lies that women believe. There's so many lies. When I was kind of doing this, like you need to suffer for Jesus. You just need to be, try harder. You just need, God hates all divorce. There's lots of lies that women believe that they've been told that they haven't learned to think for themselves. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't listen to our leaders. I believe our leaders can be really helpful, but even me as a leader, we can all be wrong. And so we all need to take responsibility for how we listen to people and whether or not what they're saying lines up with really the whole counsel of God, along with the character of God. We want to look at both things. What is God saying? And is this who God is? Because we can take one verse and God could look like I loved Jacob and I hated Esau. Right? So we take that one verse. Oh my gosh, does God pick certain people out of the Bible to hate and he doesn't love anybody else? I mean, you can take something and make a picture of God that doesn't line up with the whole picture of God. And so sometimes we have to say, I don't quite understand what he means by that verse, because that's not who God says he is. So this is where it's so important that we know God's word and we don't just listen to what people say is God's word as only God's word, because God's word has a big picture inside of a big story with a big person of God. And we want to see all of that in combination. I'm constantly being advised to be patient with my husband who has dementia. Yeah, I think you would have to be really patient with someone who has dementia because they can't help it and they can't change. But what you're going to have to do is take really good care of yourself, because you don't have an endless supply of patience. So here's where you're going to be really careful in your energy resource. I think this is what happens, is that we feel like we need to be the only caregiver or the only, the suffering, sacrificing servant. And then we start getting depleted and we can't be patient anymore. So just understand that. And I think we don't honor the limitations of being human. So we don't honor that we are physical bodies. I remember working with a woman who was telling herself that I can get more done if I only sleep 6 hours a night instead of 8 hours a night. So she was like this doer. I want to, get my house clean. I work full time. I've got all these kids. So if I just cut out my sleep, I can get all my laundry folded. I can get everything done. That makes me feel good. And so she did that, and she was functioning that way, but she found herself getting a little bit more depressed and more depleted and more cranky in her life. And then one day on her way home from work, guess what her body did? Her body said, we've had enough. And at 5:30 in the afternoon, she fell fast asleep at the wheel of her car. All right? So the body doesn't lie. And when you are giving and giving and giving, and you're not refreshing your spirit and your soul and your body will eventually tell you, through crankiness, through depression, through falling asleep at the wheel, I've had enough. I can't do anymore. Energy is gone. Bank account is empty. And you have not taken good care of you. And so I would just really encourage you, if you are a caregiver of someone who has dementia or cancer or an elderly parent, whatever, it is not God's will for you to give up your health in order to take care of them. So yes, be kind, take care of people who need, especially when you're related to them. Of course we should do that. But in order to do that, whether you do that financially or whether you do that physically, you gotta replenish the storehouse, right? So if you were paying for an elderly person to live in a nursing home or in a hospital or to have home health care because you wanted them to have care, you would have to replenish the money account in order for that to happen without you feeling all stressed out, right? All right, so you'd have to work, or you'd have to have an inheritance, or you have to somehow pay for Medicaid or get medicated. Somehow this money account has to be ongoing replenished in order for you to keep paying for that. In the same way, if you're not replenishing your storehouse of energy, you can't be patient. You can't. Because we only have certain limitations. I remember when my little boy was a baby and he was crying and he was so colicky. He just couldn't sleep. And, I was trying to be a good mom, and I grew up in an abusive home. My mother was abusive, so I was so afraid I was going to be abusive. And he was depleting me. He was crying and crying and crying. And I could empathize how you could just take a baby and shake it or throw it out the window or whatever, because it was just so exhausting. I couldn't sleep. And finally, I was so exhausted. I remember putting him in his bassinet. My husband was at work. I remember putting him in his bassinet. He was probably 2 months old, screaming his lungs out. And I just laid on the bed and I fell fast asleep. Now, he was safe in his bassinet. He was screaming. I was just out. I was out, like unconscious out. I was so tired. And my husband comes home from work and the kid's screaming. I'm like unconscious on the bed because I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think we have to honor our own limitations. Those are our boundaries. Our boundaries have been crossed and our energy is gone and our body's going to shut down, right? And we're going to fall asleep or we're going to break down or get sick. And that's not being a good steward of yourself. So yes, you need to be patient with someone who has dementia, and you need to take really good care of yourself. It's not either or, both and. And how do I do that so I can be patient? And maybe it's even limiting the amount of time you're having with them and having other people come in and help you. That's not a bad thing. It's good to admit your limitations, right? It's good to admit your limitations. I try to tell my cousin to divorce her husband. He beats her. He does not go to church anymore. He used to even sing in church now. He beats her. She wants divorce. She won't divorce him because that is what? I don't see. Let me see if Martha has any more questions. I don't see them in there, but I can't read the end of it. But if you come to the webinar, I talk about the lie, God hates divorce. Is that true? Is that true? Does God hate all divorce? Really? Is that what it says? Come to the webinar, LeslieVernick /join webinar to sign up on February 4th. Sign up now, attend the webinar February 4th in order to find out the answer to that lie. Another lie we're going to cover. I'll give you some sneak previews. Have you ever heard the lie or the statement? I shouldn't say it's a lie. You just need to die to yourself. You just need to die to yourself and everything will be okay. Just die to yourself. You're being selfish. Just die to yourself. What does that mean? What does it mean when you need to die to yourself so you can live with a husband who's abusing you or being cruel or taking all the money? What does it mean to just die to yourself in Christ? What does that mean? Because traditionally it's been told just shut up and endure. Is that what it really means? Is that what God's really, he does tell us to die to ourselves, but what does that mean biblically if we look at the big picture? So we're going to address that lie. And another lie is, well, there's nothing I can do. Really? So let me close by telling a story that I've been telling lately. So if you've heard me say this on a Facebook Live, bear with me, but it was just such a funny story for me. It illustrated so much of where we're at. So I went to a meeting last week in San Diego, and I didn't go with a bunch of colleagues, but I was meeting different colleagues there who are helping me be a better businesswoman, because I'm not a businesswoman. I'm a counselor coach, but I have a business now, a bigger business that I sometimes I don't know how to do very well. So I'm getting some help that way. And so I went to this meeting, and there was about 10 of us that rented a vacation by owner house so that we could stay together because it was cheaper than each of us getting a hotel room. So we rented this house, and it was in La Jolla in San Diego, beautiful house, and it was gated. So of course, most houses there are gated. So I'm the first one who gets out of the Uber, and we got a code to get in the front door. And of course, being oldest, I had to go to the bathroom. So I got out the Uber. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I got to get this code and I got to go to the bathroom. So I get to the gate, which is a big wooden gate for the driveway. And it's got a big lock on it with a key. And I don't have a key. And I'm thinking, oh, there's a code somewhere. And so I think that's locked. So I go over to the other part of the house, the gate around the house, and there's a doorway, an entrance with a code. So I put the code in, it doesn't work. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go to the bathroom. So I call my colleague who rented the house, and I said, the code's not working. I can't get in. I got to go to the bathroom. You got to call the owner and find out what's wrong with the code. She goes, oh my gosh, my plane's been delayed. I'm not going to be there for another 5 hours. I'm thinking, I can't sit out here for 5 hours. What am I going to do? So I'm sitting on the stoop, like rocking myself, thinking, I got to go to the bathroom. What am I going to do? And another colleague of mine gets out of her Uber, and she doesn't see me because I'm sitting on the stoop kind of behind something, and I see her. And she goes up to the big gate that I just was at that had the big lock on it. And she goes like this. she pushes it open. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I told myself a lie. I told myself it was locked because it looked locked. And because I told myself it was locked and I believed that lie, I never questioned it. I was miserable for 15 minutes worrying about peeing in my pants when all I had to do was push on the door to see if it was locked, and it wasn't locked. And as soon as she did that, I jumped up and I ran after her and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so glad you're smarter than me. You pushed that gate open. And we went and used the code for the front door and got in. And I went to the bathroom. I didn't pee my pants. But it just shows us how powerful unchecked beliefs. It was reasonable to say, oh, the door's locked. See this big lock here? But I never tested it. I never checked it out. And so please come to the webinar on February 4th, because there's a lot of lies we believe that we just believe. We never even think they're lies. There's something we believe. The door's locked. See the big lock? It's locked. Never checking. Is it really locked? Is it really true? And so I'm going to uncover some of those in the webinar that will help you be healthy and strong, woman of God or man of God. And so hope to see you there. Thanks for showing up. Give me some feedback if you'd like me to do this again. It was kind of fun. And I'd like to meet some new people on YouTube. We have a big Facebook community, but just starting to get into YouTube. So help me to see if this is helpful and give me some feedback so I can know whether we should do it some more. All right, take care. God bless.